We began to Farbrengen this afternoon that Parsha Shoftim is always in the month of Elul. It always comes out that we read Parsha Shoftim when we are already in Elul. As far as Riyeh, it's not necessarily has to be in Elul. We look back at the calendar, we will find that Riyeh sometimes is in Elul, sometimes it is not in Elul yet, and sometimes it may be on the Shabbos of Rosh Chodesh Elul, if Rosh Chodesh Elul should fall out on a Shabbos, on that given year. However, as far as Shoftim is concerned, Shoftim is always ready once we are already in the month of Elul. What is the month of Elul? The month of Elul is, as the expression of the Frierdiker Rebbe goes, it's a month of Cheshbon HaNefesh. It's a month of Cheshbon, it's a month of set aside when the Yid has an opportunity to calculate all his wrongdoings from the past year and see to it to correct them in the year to come. That's the idea of the month of Elul. And as the Rebbe went on, this is a tremendous thing, that whole concept of tshuva, the concept of correcting something which was done in the past, and to say that a Yid has a koyach to correct it. This is something which only the koyach ha-Torah it can be so. In other words, it's not for Torah. How does a Yid have a power to do something now which will correct wrongdoings which he did a long time ago, during 8 months ago, 10 months ago, whenever? Being that we give a Yid koyach, Torah has given a Yid koyach to correct things that he has done in the past. This is something which only Torah possesses, this koyach, to be able to give a Yid a power to correct things which were once done already. And being that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the entire world, the Medrash tells us, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah, and that's how He created the world. In other words, the Torah served as Diftarois or Pinkisois, Torah served as a blueprint for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the entire world. The Mele, we see not only B'negei Tshuva, we see these things B'negei other inyanim also, which the Rebbe has given a koyach into Torah, that Torah can change Metzias. Torah can change the reality. Actually, the whole idea of Tshuva is also that Torah is changing the reality. In other words, something which was done one way, and here it's being changed completely. Why? Because the Yid is doing Tshuva and he's regretting it. He's expressing the feeling of Tshuva and what he's already done. But because we find the Yerushalmi says, based on the pasuk L'keil goymer aloi, that when a girl matures and she reaches the age of 12, well, that's maturity by a girl. By boys, bat mitzvah, and by girls, it's an Indian at the age of 12. So the Yerushalmi says that it happened to be the month of Adar was about to come, and Adar we know is a month that Bezdin has the power to change the month of Adar and add an additional Adar. In other words, make the year into a leap year. So actually, after Adar normally, we would go into Nisan. If Bezdin decided to add on a month, the year of Nisan doesn't begin yet. Why? Because there's an additional Adar. So the Yerushalmi discusses this inyan, and he claims that when a girl is about to mature, and even she's already began to show the signs of maturity, at the age of 12, if Bezdin decided to extend the year and add an additional month, the siman of maturing disappears, and it wouldn't come till the age of 12, in other words, she will really reach the age of 12, which will be by the oncoming month, by the month of Nisan. So from here we see that Rebbe says, the Rebbe has used this power not only the Negei Tshuva, but he's given Torah this koyach. Who are the ones that create the months and the years of the year and arrange for a leap year? This is Torah. Bezdin is Torah. Bezdin represents Torah. The Mele Bezdin has this koyach to change the mitzvahs, to change the reality. The Rebbe said furthermore, even if one fulfilled certain mitzvahs, the Rebbe discussed last week. However, while we fulfilled the mitzvahs were lacking kavanah, and we know that mitzvahs, main thing in a mitzvah is the action of the mitzvah. However, the kavanah is of extreme importance and adds a lot to the fulfillment of the mitzvah. So later, at a later opportunity, a person is given a later chance that though the Ma'aseh HaMitzvah was done a long time ago, and at that time when he did the Ma'aseh was lacking kavanah. Now when he does tshuva, he could do tshuva and correct it, and it would be considered that the Ma'aseh which he did sometime during the year is considered as it was done a Ma'aseh together with kavanah. Though at the time when he did the Ma'aseh there was no kavanah at the Ma'aseh, it is just now, months later, that he's doing tshuva. And he's doing tshuva on these particular mitzvahs which he fulfilled without kavanah, and he wants to add on the Ma'aseh to this. He wants to add on the kavanah to the Ma'aseh. So tshuva has such a koyach that it can add on kavanah to Ma'aseh. In other words, Ma'aseh HaMitzvahs which were done a long time ago, a long time earlier, and at that time they were lacking the kavanah. Being now that he's doing tshuva on this fact why he fulfilled the mitzvah only without the kavanah, so now Torah gave him such a koyach that it's considered that as he's done the mitzvah together with kavanah, the Ma'aseh of the mitzvah together with the kavanah. Then the Rebbe went on. The Rebbe said, the Medrash says, Avlos lekarte, avdos kinimusa. If you go to a city, you have to act as the customs of the city. The Rebbe says, the Indian which he's going to talk about now is also something which deals with customary in these countries. In these countries, it's customary that there's an Indian vacation that children are given 2 months a year. Summertime is given a vacation al pi Torah, from the learning of Torah. Rebbe said, really, he doesn't know where the heter is from to give a heter to take 2 months a year, period of the year, and to free children. The children shouldn't be learning Torah during that time. The only heter, he says, could be the heter of the expression in Gemara and Chazal, Ava Vishana Nasike heter. If one has done things many times, it's already considered like he's allowed to. That's on one hand. On the other hand, the Rebbe says, being that Yidden are taught doing it, it's still a practice and it's being done in yeshivas, and from yeshivas as well. So we must hope, the Rebbe says, at the time that the children are not learning, at least this time is utilized for inyanim of Yiddishkeit and inyanim of Torah and Kedusha. Even in these institutions, the Rebbe continues, where there is no vacation giving during the summer and the children are learning during the summer months, still we cannot compare as the learning in the cheder or in the school, as the learning is going on during the summer months, as according as the learning is going on during the entire school year. It is naturally the much easier way. It's not as with a complete seriousness as during the entire school year, the learning of the summer months. So Mamela, now that we've already passed the summer months and we're ready to get into the regular learning of the school year, so we have to, the Rebbe is continuing, really approach this learning with a tremendous simcha. And Bechlal, the idea of Torah, when Torah is learned with simcha, it has a much stronger impact. The Rebbe says, we all know that great attention is given when a child is being brought into cheder. And we know it's customary that when a child is being brought into cheder, the first pasuk that he's being taught, a boy is being taught, is the Chumash, the beginning of Vayikra. The Yiddish minig that way, that's when a child begins learning, he's usually taught the first pasuk of the Chumash Vayikra. When a child is brought in to cheder, it's naturally done with a tremendous expression of simcha from his parents, who are bringing the child into the learning of Torah. And then the Rebbe says it's customary to express to the child the feeling of a famous song which used to be sung in the old home, that Torah is the best Torah is the best type of merchandise, better than Roshinkes and Mandlin. It's even better than raisins and almonds. And here the Rebbe said, it came out to talk already many times, that it was an old Jewish custom that when little infants were put to sleep, it was customary by the mothers and grandmothers that they would put them to sleep with this nigging that Torah is the best of Torah, best of Roshinkes and Mandlin. Mel, the Rebbe says that when the child is being brought into cheder, and then also stress is given to the child on the great importance of the learning of Torah, it's also usually expressed to the child in his way, and a youngster really cannot grasp yet the real inner greatness of Torah, so that's why it's portrayed to the child that Torah is the best of Torah, better than Roshinkes and Mandlin. And here the Rebbe went on demanding very strongly that now that we're standing at the beginning of the school year, to reach out to every child to join proper Jewish education, and at the same time the children that are going back to the school year should really go back to learn with a real tremendous amount of simcha. Because when we approach learning with simcha, and the child expresses, the child is instilled happiness and joy when he's approaching to learn Torah, the Torah that he's learning is going to have a completely different impact on the child when he's learning it with simcha. And the Rebbe went on later in the Farbrengen, and the Rebbe also referred to this thinking that we're now standing at the opening of the school year. And the Rebbe again stressed the great importance of chinuch and how parents shouldn't neglect the main thing, which the main thing is to give to a child. What do parents have to give to a child? The main thing to offer a child naturally is Torah. Like the Rebbe says, the way it's customary in many homes, unfortunately, that the boy is given a bicycle, and later when he grows up he's given a car, and this is made into the major union which a child is being given, as well as a girl is being trained that every day she has to put on a new dress. Now the Rebbe says we can understand what's the outcome of such type of a chinuch. And the Rebbe spoke about it very strongly, demanding that the proper type of a chinuch, and we see usually the nature by parents is that parents try to give their children the best and do anything, look away on their own things as long as to see to it that their children should have the best of everything. So male parents have to see to be guided that their children should really get the best of everything, in the sense of getting the most proper and best chinuch as far as chinuch HaTorah goes. At the same time, the Rebbe alerted that the proper time that being we're in the month of Elul and talking about children going back to school, it's also a proper time to remind everyone not only about the union of mitzvah chinuch, but as well all the 10 mitzvahim and the great importance of all the mitzvahim, which is the most proper and unique time now in the month of Elul, should be utilized to reach out to Yidden with all of these mitzvahim. Then the Rebbe went on and referred to the Gemara, which the Gemara tells us that there was a difference between Rabbi Shmuel's approach to Torah as well as Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's approach to Torah. We all know the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's approach to Torah was that the Gemara tells us Klum Adam Chayrish Adam Zereya Terosei Matahela. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai felt that if a person is going to be involved in work, in a profession, in an occupation, what's going to be with Torah? Terosei Matahela. However, Rabbi Shmuel felt that it cannot be demanded from every Yid to tear himself away and be solely involved in the learning of Torah. And that's why he suggested that a person should have a kviyas itim for Torah. A person should have a set-aside time when he should learn Torah daily, and together with it he should be involved in his occupation or profession, whatever it may be, to support himself and his family for a living. The Gemara concludes, Harbei asu k'Rabbi Shmuel v'olsa b'yadam, Harbei asu k'Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai v'lo yolsa b'yadam. There were many that followed the advice of Rabbi Shmuel and succeeded. However, many followed the advice of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and unfortunately did not succeed. Why? Because this is not a derech for everyone to be involved only in the learning of Torah and not to be involved in any Gashmistic inyan and whatsoever. A person is supposed to see to it to provide his family and himself with the Gashmistic needs, and together with it, naturally, to have the Kriyas in the Torah. So here the Rebbe says, however, we find being that it's our duty to have a Kriyas in the Torah, so the time when a Yid is Kaveya in the Torah, the time that a Yid grabs away from his busy day, from his busy schedule, and dedicates this time, whatever the time may be, to the learning of Torah, this time of the day, the Rebbe says, the Yid has to be in a position of Terosei and Nosei. In this part of the day, he has to be in such type of a level that Torah is his occupation. In other words, at this time of the day, it's V'rachacha Hashem Elokecha b'chol asher ta'aseh, the Rebbe blesses him in whatever he will be doing. The Mela will have the bracha of Hashem in his occupation, in his profession, whatever he will be doing to sustain himself and his family. However, during this time, when he's involved in the learning of Torah, this is a time when the person has to feel that nothing else is in existence other than himself learning Torah. The Mela, at this time of the day, he's at the level which Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai is demanding Torah Siyam Nosei. Same time, the Rebbe said, if we're talking about children do not have a yoke of parnasah upon themselves. Why? Because they're being provided from their parents with whatever they need. The Mela, when we're talking about the learning of the Torah, what a child learns Torah, it's also in a format of Torah Seyam Nasai. The child is solely involved in the learning of Torah and has no other thing on his mind, or at least shouldn't have any other thing on his mind, because the child is being provided with all of his needs. The Mela, the child can be fully involved in the learning of Torah without any other worry. As well, the Rebbe said, as it's referred to in this country, there's an expression, once a person has retired. If a person is retired, the same thing. He does not have the day-to-day worries of parnas on his head. The Mele, he can also be involved in the learning of Torah. Can also be involved in the learning of Torah to the fullest extent, to such a way of asperosayim nasa, that his occupation is only Torah. He has no other occupation on his head that should distract him from the learning of Torah. Then the Rebbe went on and referred to what he mentioned briefly last week, and we mentioned it, the taich which is brought in Farbrengen on this week's Chazarah is Shoftim v'shoitrim titel l'chol v'chol sha'arecha, which the pasuk of the taich is that the setup of the Torah, the judicial system, which required Shoftim, judges, and Shoftim and police, how Torah requires it to be set up. However, the Rebbe quoted a taich, quoted in the Sichas, well, the Maimah was based on this taich, that they are shi'orim. Shi'orim means at the gate. There are personal gates within each and every person. Each and every person, there are 7 shi'orim in a person. A person has 7 openings in his body as well, on his face. And basically, it's the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, 2 openings in the nose, and the person's mouth, which altogether are a total of 7. Mela, this is the taich. Shoftim v'shoitrim titel l'chol b'chol sha'arecha, that it's our obligation to put, what's the pshat, to put judges and police. A person is supposed to guide himself and guard himself. It is our obligation to see to it that these inyanim that deal with our eyes, ears, and mouth, and whatever we sense has to be properly oisgehalten, has to be as it should be, only al pi derech haTorah. And that's the pnimis diketaich. The inner taich in the pasuk of the beginning of this week's Chazarah, Shoftim v'shoitrim titel l'chol b'chol sha'arecha, referring not only to the physical sha'ar, which refers to the cities in Eretz Yisrael, which the Torah told us that we are supposed to have a system of judges and police in every city, but also in every sha'ar, in every opening, meaning every opening within each and every person is supposed to see to it to watch himself properly in these inyanim in his own personal shi'arim. Then the Rebbe went on, customary to learn the Rashi in this week's Chazarah, as well as to explain the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Rebbe gave a hakdamah in the learning of Rashi. The Rebbe always keeps on stressing that Rashi is an inyan which is basically pshuto shel mikra. Rashi deals with explaining the pshat of the pasuk. In other words, the 5-year-old child cannot pass the learning of Chumash without the commentary of Rashi. In other words, Rashi's inyan is to tell us inyanim that are completely essential, that without it we cannot even understand pshat in the pasuk. Otherwise, Rashi does not get involved in commenting. In fact, Rebbe says, Even Ezra gives a title to Rashi, that Rashi is referred to as a Parshan Dasa. What's the pshat Parshan Dasa? Parshan Dasa means that his inyan is pshat, Parshanos, to say the simple pshat of the pasuk. This is inyan shel Rashi. At the same time, we find, the Rebbe says, and it's extremely remarkable, we find tremendous expressions in Shalach HaKodesh and in other Svarim that stress the greatness of Rashi. There's a famous expression from the Rabbeim that Rashi is Yeina Shel Torah. The wine of Torah is expressed in Rashi. So this already shows that Rashi carries in his Pirush something more than the mere pshat, the mere pshuta shel mikra. It's Yeina Shel Torah. And as we find the pasuk, that Yayin has something really outstanding within itself, that Yayin has a koyach, wine has this koyach that it's misameach of a kin v'anashim, the pasuk tells us. Yayin can be misameach, can bring about happiness to people and to Hashem. That's how the pasuk gives us a description on Yayin. The same type of description can apply in the spiritual sense. If we want to define the greatness of Rashi, Rashi Rashi is not only a pshat that tells us Pashat Atayis, Pshuta Shel Mikra, Rashi tells us Yeina Shel Torah. Rashi reveals their inner inyonim in Torah, which are referred to as the wine of Torah. Then the Rebbe says we find a different classification B'negei Rashi. We find an interpretation B'negei Rashi that Rashi possesses inyonim mufloyim, meaning real great things, real outstanding inyonim. The Rebbe says if we were to really evaluate these expressions carefully, the expression that tells us that Rashi possesses within his commentary inyonim mufloyim shows a yet greater inyan in Rashi as the expression that says that Rashi brings about the wine of Torah. With the wine of Torah, the Rebbe says this is something which is open. Just like we see the nature of wine has a koyach to bring about simcha. Wine has this power that brings joy to people and to Hashem. So we say that Rashi koyach is to reveal the ruchnis b'kiyayin of Torah. When we say that Rashi has inyonim mufloyim within itself, here it shows that there are tremendously hidden things in Rashi. Real in-depth inyonim, whatever Rashi comment is not just Pshuta Shel Mikra, but at the same time it has inyonim mufloyim. The Rebbe says this is really something out of the ordinary. On one hand we say that every word in Rashi is extremely accurate in the realm of Pshat, and at the same token, inyonim that are here to explain in Pshat, Pshuta Shel Mikra, what is required for a 5-year-old to understand Rashi, and we say that without this Pshat, the 5 or 6-year-old child who's learning Chumash wouldn't understand the Rashi, wouldn't understand the pasuk without the commentary of Rashi. Rather, in the same Rashi there are inyonim mufloyim, inyonim that are really telling us about the greatness of the wonder and the unlimited greatness that is within Torah. And this has been again each and every Rashi. We find the Rashi the Rebbe goes on in this week's Sedra, which obviously is a Pashat Rashi, and the Rashi is full of kasha. The Rashi is towards the end of the Sedra, where the Torah is talking about Egla Arufa. It is Kapitel Chav Aleph, Pasuk Dalet. We'll just review what the Psukim here are talking about. Psukim here are talking Ki Yemotzei Cholo Ba'adoma. Just saying the content. Person was found, the dead body was found, and it's unknown. It's unknown who killed this person. What does the Torah say has to be done? That the Zekenecha, the elders, the Shoftim and the judges, have to go out into the open road and see where this body was found, and measure, be sure, identical, make sure closer to what city was this body found. Once it's already revealed, what happens is, then the elders of that city, where the body was found too closer, have to take eglos baka, ashaloi ubad ba, ashaloi mashcha boil. They have to take a cat, and this one that was never worked with and never had a yoke on itself. They have to take it down into a valley. A valley also which does not grow and does not produce. The Torah tells us what has to be done. In that valley, that is where this egla, the calf, had to be killed. Let us look into Rashi. On Pasuk Dalet. The Orfu, the second Rashi and the first. So Rashi explains. Koitei Orfa Bekupu. Rashi is describing us exactly how the procedure was, how the egla, how the calf was killed. Okay. Then Rashi goes on. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rebbe says, Tavai egla bashnasa, shaloi otis l'chayre. Let's come, the calf, which is only a year old and has not produced any fruit yet. The titrais, and let it get killed, b'makim she'eino yisatayre, in an area which will also not produce any fruit. As the Pasuk just told us that it has to be a nachal shelo yovad v'lo yizareh. Then Rashi goes on, Lechape al harigoso shel zeh shelo yenichu lafis Torah. This comes as a kapara, this comes as a forgiveness on the killing of this person who was also forced into a position that he's not fruitful any longer because he was killed. So what Rashi is telling us, Rashi is giving logic reason for this whole procedure. Being that this person's life was cut, was taken away, and he's in a position, brought into a position not to be able to be fruitful any longer, and Mela, we take a behemoth who is not fruitful, who is only 1 year old and has not brought any fruit, and is killed b'makom, which does not produce any fruit as well, which is a nachalei. If we hold to the klal of Rashi, which Rashi tells us right away in the beginning in Bereshit, Rashi gives out a ruling, that his inyan is only to go ahead and explain Shat in the pasuk, Pshuta Shel Mikvah, then this entire Rashi is completely not understood. First of all, Rashi's inyan is not halacha to describe exactly how the calf was killed. The calf was killed for also. Rashi goes into details, to describe exactly how the calf was killed. It's not Rashi's inyan to tell us this. Then the question arises furthermore. The Rebbe goes on. The child who is learning Shoftim has already learned Chumash up to now as well. And he's gone through all of Chumash Vayikra. And we see in Chumash Vayikra, which is a Chumash which is full of details of Karban. And each and every Karban has its accomplishment, what the Karban comes to forgive us. And Rashi not necessarily gets involved in details to tell us what every Karban is mechapera. Here it comes to the pasuk here, where the Torah tells us about an egla arufa. Rashi gives a whole elaborate explanation. And Rashi gets involved. Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Rebbe says, and gives a whole reasoning why there was such type of a procedure. Actually, Rashi's inyan is not to get involved to give reasons for mitzvah. The male of Rashi does not, it's not his inyan to get involved in such in length and in depth and detail interpretation of inyanim. Why does Rashi do it over here? Also, the Rebbe asks, it's completely strange the expression in Rashi, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem said, Kadosh Baruch Hu said. What is the negaya all mitzvahs? All mitzvahs also the Rebbe said. Each and every mitzvah, whatever we're learning in the entire Chumash is Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, if we were to learn the details of a Korban Noila, Korban Mishlamim, each and every Chatos, every Korban we have to learn about, we don't find an expression when Rashi does explain these Korbanos, and where Rashi explains what Rashi explains the negaya, these Korbanos, Rashi never uses an expression, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Naturally it's Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The entire Torah is Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The entire Torah is the saying of Hashem. Here we see Rashi stresses Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rebbe says, Tava Yegla Bashmata, as Rashi gets involved in the whole explanation. The way the Rebbe explains this Rashi, the Chalal we know that there's an inyan of Karban. The child who is learning Chumash and has gone through Chumash up to Parsha Shoftim understands the idea of a Karban. However, where was a Karban brought to the Beit HaMikdash? Normally we know a Karban was brought to the Beit HaMikdash. There were times when there was Heter Bama, in other words, before the Yidden had the Beit HaMikdash, Yidden were allowed to bring Karbanos in certain areas, but it also required a Bama, it required certain rules and regulations which pertain to the area where a Karban was brought. We go back, all the way back in history, we find in Torah Shebeksav, we find in Chumash that Noach made a mizbeach for Karban. It says Adam was also makas Karbanos. So in Chumash we don't find that Adam brought a man a mizbeach. However, in Torah Shebal Peh, in other words, in Medrash, and in Chazal we find the details that the Karbanos were brought where on the mizbeach. The male, the child who is going through Chumash and approaches this entire procedure, a tremendous question arises in his mind. What's happening here? Something completely strange. Always he knows that korbanos were brought only in the Beis Hamikdash, only on a Mizbeach. Here we see that an area which is far away from Beis Hamikdash has no shaykhs to Yerushalayim, has no shaykhs to any area close to the Beis Hamikdash at all. On the contrary, it may be complete distance from Yerushalayim, from Kodesh HaKadoshim, from the Mizbeach and from Beis Hamikdash. In the area where the Chalal was found, the city close by where the dead body was found. And here he's learning in Chumash that this is the area where he's told that a korban had to be brought. Actually, this is the same idea as a korban. And that's why the child here is bothered with this question. This child is bothering the child. Rabbi goes on, we find a korban which was not brought exactly in the Beis Hamikdash. And that is what? The Parah Adumah. The Parah Adumah, which had this koyach in itself. As we know, Zeis Chukas HaTorah, Parashas Chukas, we are told at length about the Parah Adumah. The Parah Adumah had this inyan that it was metayah, it purified, one who was tameh, one who was impure. Parah Adumah was not brought on a regular mizbeach. However, where was the Parah Adumah brought? In Yerushalayim. Right after Sefet, right after Sefet. To find a korban not being offered in the entire area of Yerushalayim, for the child learning Chumash, this is the first time we find a minion like that. Something similar to this has not been found anywhere in Chumash. The Mele here we're learning something so strange. So the child who's learning Chumash is aroused with this question within the child: what's going on? So Mamela Rashi, since Inyan is Pshutishal Mikra, and here the Rebbe stressed, Rashi would answer many questions, but Rashi doesn't have to tell us what the kasha is. In other words, Rashi is not making it here in a format of a kasha and a perek. Rashi is making it in a regular pshat. However, with this pshat of Rashi, this kasha is for this kasha, this question is self-explanatory already. The Mela, but Rashi is giving us this interpretation. Why here it's different than all over? As Rashi tells us, but being that this person's life was cut that he cannot be fruitful any longer, that's why a korban which was also not fruitful in Eglah Bashnasa is brought in an area which is also not a fruitful area Shalayuba, an area, as the pasuk describes it, the only question that is left is why Rashi has to stress Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, and at the same time why Rashi has to give us the details of Kodesh Alpha B'Kupit to describe exactly how the killing of this calf took place. The Rebbe is learning Pshat. Rashi is stressing Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu. In other words, the child here is out disappointed. What kind of an Indian is it bringing a korban not to the Mokim HaMishkan, not to the Mokim HaShchina? We know if we bring korbanos, not in the Mokim HaShchina, not by the Mizbeach, then it has no shaykhs to the Eibishter. As there's a pasuk, Yizbechu Lasirim. Rabbi quoted a pasuk. Lasirim Ashalei Alakah. Yizbechu Lasirim Ashalei Alakah. In other words, it's a shechting which has no shaykhs to the Eibishter, which has no shaykhs to Getlachkas, which has no shaykhs to Hashem, if it's not brought in the area of the Beis HaMikdash. So that is why Rashi stresses here, on the contrary, no, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is not a Yizbechu Lasirim, this is not some shechting that has no shaykhs to Hashem. Though it is not done in the area of the Beis HaMikdash, though it is not done in Yerushalayim, it's not done on the Mizbeach, still Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is behind it, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that commanded us that it should be done this way. Why? As Rashi goes into details and explains.
Not merely
Right. So that's why there's a stress here to take it out of any shaykhs Avodah Zarah whatsoever, and it's an inyan of Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It has a shaykhs to Hashem, and this is the will of Hashem that this korban had to be brought this way. Why does Rashi get involved into details to describe how the killing was done? So Rashi says, being who had to perform this duty, this was done by the elders, the Ziknei, the Shoftim, the Ziknei, the Mele. We know already, we learned before, that there's an expression by Korbanis in the Indian of Arpul, a minion of arpa. We find it by the kalbanas of a bird. By kalbanas of a bird, the kohen would do the killing of the bird with his finger. And mainly the question here we're talking about an eglah, who's already a calf, it's not a bird. And who has to kill this eglah? It has to be done not by the kohen, it has to be done by the ziknei. It could be alte yidden amongst them. And elderly people, it may be very hard for them to kill the calf. The technical thing. And they may be stuck with it. So Rashi tells us, it's not an Indian that Rashi is getting involved in halacha. Rashi tells us here it could be done, it doesn't have to be done with the hand bedaska. Here it could be done with a keli, it could be done with a kupit. Kupit is a keli. How they would kill this eglah, how they would kill this calf, and it would make it easier on the older people whose duty it was to do this killing, that they didn't have to perform it by their finger, by their hand, but they were able to use a keli to do it. This is how the Rebbe is learning Pshat in this Rashi. So we see how each and every word in Rashi is accurate, and it's not some that Rashi is getting involved in giving us reasons for mitzvahs in places where Rashi, it's not his inyan to give a reason for a mitzvah. There's a reason for it, why Rashi here interprets all the details. And with the Hakdama, Rama HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all this is extremely accurate, and all gehalten according to the klal of Rashi, that Rashi's inyan is Pshuta Shel Mikvah. Then the Rebbe went on to learn a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Today's Pirkei Avos is the last Perek Shishi. The Perek which is also known as the Perek of Kinyan Torah. It's known as Kinyan Torah because this Perek tells us in detail how one can acquire Torah. The entire Perek talks about the greatness of Torah. Rabbi said the original minhag of reciting Pirkei Avos during the summer months was originally set up. It should be done in the weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. The Rebbe quoted the pasuk in Chumash Shmos, "V'yitziacha sa'am miMitzrayim tavdon es Elokim al har hazeh." Pasuk means Pashat, that when he will take the nation out of Mitzrayim, they will worship the Rebbe on the Har Hazeh on Sinai. So the Rebbe learns Pshat that we say Pirkei Avos from the weeks from V'yitziacha sa'am miMitzrayim, meaning weeks from Yitzias Mitzrayim, till Tavgan es Elokim al har hazeh, till the weeks of Shavuot. That's the original minhag of saying Pirkei Avos. Later there were those that added, as Alter Rebbe writes, and it's quoted here in the Siddur as well, right before Pirkei Avos, that there are there are some that feel that to also say Pirkei Avos, not only between Pesach and Shavuos, but as well from Shavuos also until Rosh Hashanah. But the original minhag of Pirkei Avos, the original inyan of Pirkei Avos, is from Pesach till Shavuos. The Melech comes out at the Shabbos before Shavuos. We learn the Perek Shishi, Perek Kinyan Torah, the Perek that deals with the greatness of Torah. The entire Perek goes on for a couple of pages telling us all different means and ways how one can acquire Torah. Then the Rebbe says, let us turn to the last Mishnah. Kol ma shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai, whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in this world, Loi beroi elo l'chvoido, was created only for the honor of Hashem, for His covet. Quote the pasuk, Shenana, Koil hanikro b'shmi u'l'chvoidi, the pasuk in Yeshaya, Berosev yitzartev afasitiv. Rabbi mentioned that this pasuk is quoted a lot of Hasidus, and Hasidus ties in this pasuk with the famous inyan which is discussed in Hasidus of Daled Eilamis, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. Here we have it, Shmi and Kvoidi. Shmi would mean Atzilus, Shmi and Kvoidi would mean Atzilus. Then we have Berosev, Yitzartev afasitiv, which is Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, Bia, as it's known in its abbreviation in Hasidus. Rabbi says it's a tremendous question. The entire Perek was discussing the greatness of what? The greatness of Torah. Let us turn back one page. We see Mishnah Yud. Hamisha kinyonim kon HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has 5 kinyonim, 5 treasures in the world. The Elohein, what are they? Torah kinyan echad. Torah is one of them. Mishnah goes on with others as well. However, we see that Mishnah, one just before this very last, how the Mishnah is out-stressing Torah. The entire Perek is stressing Torah. So when we finalize this Perek, what should the end of such a Perek have been? Also a Mishnah talking about the greatness of Torah. No. Mishnah doesn't talk here about Torah at all. Mishnah gets into a complete new concept. A concept of what? Whatever Hashem has created in the world, it was only created to His honor, to serve, to give pride and cover to Hashem. Taka, very good in it. Something which deals not only with Torah, obviously, it deals with the entire creation of the entire world, and it's something of great meaning, but what shaykhs does it have to Pirkei Avos right over here? Pirkei Avos in general is Milah de Chassidus. This Perek we know stresses the greatness of Torah. Here we find an Indian that has a shaykhs to the greatness of Torah all along in the Perek. It comes to the very end where we should find something really stressing the greatness of Torah. The Mishnah comes into a different thing, to an Indian that tells us that anything and everything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created was created to add kavod and pride to Hashem. So what the Rebbe answered on this is that we find in this Perek, we find the expression how kavod ain't kavod ela Torah. The end of Mishnah Gimel in this Perek, ain't kavod ela Torah shenema kavod chachamim yinchalu usmimim yinchalu toiv. Memele, in this Perek, when we use the word kavod, we don't necessarily mean kavod as the usual interpretation of kavod meaning pride. Kavod could stand for Torah as well. Memele, when the Mishnah here comes and serves as a finalization of the entire Perek, which the entire Perek discussed the greatness of Torah. Now that the Mishnah finalizes Kol ma shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu b'olamo leberoi elo lechvaydai, it doesn't mean the Pashut Hatayt that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, He created in His honor. It means that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in this world, He created because of Torah. That's what Kvaydai means. Being that we already were taught in this Perek that ain't kavod ela Torah. What means kavod? Kavod means Torah. So Memela, now that we're learning Mishnah Yud Aleph, here we're learning a Perek that deals with the greatness of Torah. So Mishnah Yud Aleph, which is the final Mishnah of this Perek, that stresses the greatness of Kol ma shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu b'olamo leberoi elo lechvaydai. It doesn't mean the Pashut Hatayt that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, He created for His kavod. It means whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu was created on the world. In other words, here Taka the Mishnah comes as a finalization of the entire Perek. It's a broader look on the entire union of Torah. The Mishnah here gives us a view that not only in Yonei Torah, but anything and everything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created on the world, everything, Kol ma shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'olamo leberoi elo lechvaydai. Elo is also an expression of exclusion. It means only for one purpose, that anything and everything which also a way of the Mishnah stressing this idea that anything and everything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created only because of what? Because of Torah. Because L'chvaydai means also Torah. So that would be the pshat in the Mishnah here in Mishnah Yud Aleph. Rabbi also mentioned in Farbrengen a verb in the Chazarah we are going into. If the Shoftim we come to pass is Teitei. Teitei begins with Teitei la milchama aloivecha, when the Sonei Hashem Elokecha biyodecha. You will go out into war on your enemy, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us the enemy into our hands and we will succeed. Now the Pashut Hatayt in the Chumash pertains to the wars which the Muhammad which the Yidden had when the Yidden were living in Eretz Yisrael. However, we know that there is a constant Muhammad, there's a constant war which we all go through daily with the Yetzer Hara. It's also a meaning of Muhammad. It's also a war. Rabbi Tait, when we go out into war, we have our constant battle with the Yetzer Hara. Aloi Vecha. Come to see Yetzer Hara. If we are in a position of Aloi Vecha, then it will be Mekuyim, the latter part of the pasuk of V'nasonei Hashem Elokecha biyodecha. Then we know that this spiritual war we will succeed.